What's your name?
Veronica.
Veronica, are you ready to tell us what you're building, get some feedback?
Yes.
You have a minute. What are you building?
You two are not eating enough veggies, and I'm probably right about that because 90% of Americans are not. So, but half of Americans do want to eat a little bit better. So there's a need and a desire to eat healthier. So what's the issue? The main barriers to eating veggies are cost, a lack of time and preparation, and knowledge of how to prepare vegetables. And so Edggies Veggies proposes a solution to that. Edggies removes barriers of cost, inconvenience, and a strong flavor to make the easiest way to eat your veggies. They're packaged in convenient tins that allow you to sprinkle them on to anything you're already eating, making adding health as easy as adding salt. There are similar products in the grocery store today, but they're hiding away in supplements and powders that feel very scientific. And so Edggies is food. It is a nutritional seasoning that can go on takeout, grandmother's secret gravy, and we can even help you out if there's a bin of kale in the back of your fridge that's been there for too long.
That's a minute. Good job. Can you keep that mic?
Oh yeah, of course.
Super interesting. And I don't eat enough vegetables. So I feel like I have this problem. But let me clarify one thing before we get into it. Is it a powder or not a powder?
It's not a powder. It's a custom size. So it's like salt, basically. So it's like the same kind of it's
so it is
called
a
a granule.
seasoning, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Exactly.
That's interesting. I have questions about that, but I don't want to. I'll let you go first.
I also have questions about the product.
Okay.
But great job with the pitch.
Thank you.
The problem statement, super clear and relatable. And then the product and the solution came across as well. What was not clear is exactly what the product is.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't think that it was a salt until after Sherveen asked that follow-up question. And then now my second question is, what's the veggie serving equivalent? So how do I think about like how much of your product to use relative to like, having a serving of.
As soon as I realized it was a seasoning, I was like, how much seasoning do I need to put on to get, that's a great way to put it.
So volumetrically, a tin is the equivalent of 6 salads of kale. So that's what's in there, but you're probably wondering what is nutritionally the equivalency. So 1 teaspoon has 30% of your daily value of vitamin K. That's really small. I usually add about 1.5 tablespoons. So about 3 tablespoons of Edggies is equivalent to a salad of kale.
A salad, 3 teaspoons. You said 3 teaspoons.
3 tablespoons. Sorry, getting
no, it might have been me.
Baking.
And is equivalent to a salad of kale. Mm-hmm. How much of... I don't cook at all.
Okay.
I order out a lot.
Then it's great for you.
It's great for me. But I'm going to ask my question weirdly. How much of this do I put on something? Let's say I'm having... what should I be having with this? What should I eat? Yeah, so honestly, if there's a liquid component, it's the best thing to do. So for example, like a tikka masala or something with sauce. Oh, interesting. It's a lot better. So but how many do I put in that meal? How many tablespoons do I put in? So in a tikka masala, you could probably go for the full 3 tablespoons. Oh, interesting. See, this is an interesting part of the... But in different things. I don't know if this should be in your minute pitch, but there's part of this that, again, as soon as it became a seasoning, I think so much is counterintuitive. Yeah. And fascinating, right? Yeah. But I'm in my head, how much of this do I need to put? Well... Okay, so I call it a seasoning because that's the simplest way to talk about it. Right. But I think there are a lot of ways that you can use it. You can use it anytime you're already using kale. So if you're using it in a soup, it's a bulk ingredient. It's not a seasoning. So I call it that because I'm thinking like a grocery store. And so I want people to react to that. But it's also helpful to visualize, by the way. So I think it's the right thing to do because otherwise, when you first talked about it, I imagined almost the packaging equivalent of frozen food. Yeah. Or frozen vegetables and that I was going to pour out frozen vegetables. I think it's useful from a visualization standpoint. And so our packaging kind of reflects those dual uses. So there's it's a tin, it has a lid. That's for freshness and maintaining nutrition. Then there's a sublid. That sublid has perforations so you can sprinkle it, but then you can pop that off, use a ton of it, and then pop it back on, use it like a sprinkle. Your wellness. So
got it. Super interesting. So maybe let's go down the path of, you mentioned vitamins. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the difference between your product versus actually just me taking my multivitamins. Yeah. So I wanted to build something that looks like food.
for a specific reason, which is so that people use it. And people have, like I described, these nutritional deficiencies, and vitamins are kind of hidden away in an aisle that, to me, somebody who's struggling with a nutritional deficiency isn't even going there. And so I wanted to sell something that's in an aisle that people who are eating, maybe I guess I would say like normal food or the average American are actually going to, and they can recognize it as something whole and complete. There are amazing companies like an AG1 that have these really complete multivitamins that you put in water, and there's a behavioral component, which I think we try to lean on with the sprinkle and, encouraging people to leave it on their table so that they use it more. But ultimately, I don't necessarily believe that the average American is going to consume a glass of water full of green powder. And I think the proof is in the pudding a little bit. So I wanted to do something super accessible. So that's kind of how we separate from vitamins, I guess I would say.
Makes sense. What's your background?
I was a banker.
Not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what prompted you to build this product and solve this problem?
Because I was a banker, I would stay late at work. And so I would, there's only so many sweet green salads that you can have in a week. So that was probably lunch. And then dinner, depending on how much I got yelled at that day, was probably something comforting. And so I would, want something so that I wasn't eating, completely unhealthy food, but I was going to eat what I wanted to eat. So I started to think about what could I do? And I'm not going to bring a bunch of kale to work and start chopping it in an investment bank. So I kind of started thinking about this and testing it. I tested a few different things. We tried carrots and beets. Those were a bit more unpleasant, to be honest. They were a bit rubbery. And so if we do end up doing something, along the road in that direction, it would have to be a bit of an R&D their project. But as far as greens go, spinach, kale, I'm sure there is a food waste angle of doing some alternative greens at some point. It's really nice because the flavor is very muted, and so you can add it to whatever. And the texture is kind of non-existent. Think like a cilantro rice. There's cilantro there, but it's kind of just whatever. And so that's kind of the appeal of it.
Got it.
It's fascinating. There's a desire to be invisible.
I think it's an interesting one, and then to go in a seasoning aisle where people are looking for something that stands out.
Right.
But it is the most intuitive space in a grocery store. This is something I think about a lot, where we go in a grocery store.
Yeah. And so maybe that's a good segue into talking about distribution, or how are you thinking about go-to-market?
Yeah.
What's the sequencing of that?
Yeah. So for the time being, it's a bootstrap business. We're launching in the fall, and that will be D2C. And then it's all, the timeline's a bit crunched. So it'll be D2C, and then I'll be pitching to indie retailers. And the reason that I'm doing that is to see if I can get some good feedback on what nutrition facts specifically connect people the most, what marketing campaigns connect people the most, to see how it reacts in different parts of grocery stores, and then kind of scale slowly to bigger chains. And then obviously eventually a hero grocery store is a Whole Foods. So
yeah.
It's going slowly because, again, I am new to the space.
Yeah. How do you think about competition in this space? And I don't necessarily mean direct competitors that look like you, but from a consumer lens, if I want to be healthier, and I want to make sure that I'm getting a balanced diet, how do you think about that consumer journey and how they view your product versus whatever else is available on the market?
Sure. I guess I'll go back to the first line of my pitch, or second line, I suppose. I think that there is a big hole as far as eating super healthy and eating, kind of whatever you want. And there's this gap. And so I'm trying to bridge that. And I think that could be any American. But I think to start, you need to be a bit more specific. And so I think busy people, at least when we start, just because of economies of scale, it has to be a little bit higher priced. The pricing is fine, but I would like for it to be an affordable product eventually. So that's something that weighs on my conscience. But a busy professional, a mom with kids who's trying to sneak in those veggies, that's kind of the consumer that I'm thinking about.
I'm thinking about like the psychology of your product.
Yes.
And I'm imagining an ad campaign that is just like full of people putting it on unhealthy things.
That's what I do. I do that on Instagram, and I get like really good responses.
I love that because you're kind of feeling like it's like this. The start of a good habit is maybe making the bad habit a little bit better.
Yeah. So like I went viral on a video of putting it on In-N-Out. And that was very exciting, very validating. But then I got some haters, and I like to listen to haters. And so they're like, why don't you just eat vegetables? So because I think too much about these things.
They're my haters too. They're saying the same thing to me as the consumer.
I wrote up this like really long thing based on this book called Tiny Habits. And basically it's the Stanford's, I think he's a behavioral psychologist who hypothesizes that, I don't think he hypothesizes, he's observed that the best way to actually change your behavior is to make small steps with very little judgment specifically. And so I think we're that. Like it's just very, very copy paste. And so when you start to make those small changes, bigger changes become more accessible. And we're like a gateway drug. Like I would love it if people were buying so much more kale and that's problem solved and then nobody needs us. But that's not the reality. We have Sweet Green. You can get a salad delivered. We have produce all over the country, although there are food deserts, which I think we can address as well because it's so shelf stable. But yeah, so that's kind of.
What's your vision for the business in the long run?
I think it would be wonderful to be Heinz ketchup and have like really one hero product where you're on every table in the country. And I think if we did that, the country would be better for it. I think we would just be a more healthy society. And so that's fine with me. I understand that when you're raising money, people want to see like to the moon. So as far as that, I think there's a lot that we can do as far as exploring different vegetables, no flavor, because then you can add as much as you want without, affecting the salinity of something and therefore like the sodium content and all that stuff. And then also the thesis that you can add it to anything you're already eating. If you put garlic in it, then maybe there's too much garlic, that type of thing. However, seasoning is supernatural as a continuation of this idea. And so like a popcorn seasoning with a little kale in it would be great. Or, similar to a furikake. The product is like an American furikake, to be honest.
I don't want you to do this, but by the way, could you also I guess they would all just go buy it from a supplier themselves because it's probably too expensive. But like I thought about partnerships for you for like unhealthy snacks that would sprinkle you into their product.
I'll take it.
Yeah, because it's like interesting again, like from the concept of like I think this business is gonna be really hard to build, and I'm sure you're experiencing the early stages of that. Like all of my feedback brain is like, oh man, I can't imagine the journey you're gonna have to go through to get people to buy this, and the retailers are gonna say no to you, and the seasoning comparisons. But then I go like, I love the idea of it, I want it to exist in the world. And so the reason my brain went there is I was like, oh great, that's like an interesting go-to-market and channel partner is the bag of popcorn itself. I don't think that needs to be part. Like I liked your pitch; it was a good pitch. So I don't have like a tremendous amount that I want to insert into it, other than maybe a little bit of that, like what is it? Or like, and how much of it needs to be used. I don't know how you tell that story well, but there's some way to tell that story well. But then the rest of it, I think, is this like, what happens next? I think you're having, kind of, you're answering those questions. But I would think once you are in front of investors and kind of really tackling this, a lot of them are going to be afraid for you for the same reasons we're afraid for you, even though I think we both like the product. It's like the consumer is super hard. Food is super hard. Grocery is super hard. D2C in general has experienced a downturn over the past 2 years in tech. And, it's tech adjacent. And so that's the struggle too. But addressing that by, maybe including a little bit of this vision. And even as you were talking, I was imagining this, like you're imagining a grocery store shelf. I've been imagining it on someone's table.
Yeah.
On the center of their table. Mm-hmm. And like, the other thing I've been imagining, you mentioned just like this moment of adding it. Mm-hmm. It's funny, this is going to be like a weird story. Bill Maher, the political TV host, has a show called Club Random where he's like has a podcast and he interviews famous people next to him. And on several episodes I've watched it, and he'll make himself a drink and then he'll drop, I think, ginseng or something in a dropper, but he doesn't really know what it is. The first few episodes he does it until it's either like Kara Swisher or someone actually is funny enough the person who I think goes like, Bill, what are you putting in your drink? And I'm thinking about that moment because he's not really someone, or he himself decided this is good for him as part of his cocktail. He's doing it and everyone will look at it while he's doing it. And there's this moment where I'm thinking about your product as well, of like, how do you get that to happen as frequently as possible? And I think that might be an underrated thing to think about. I know retail is a thing to think about. I know packaging itself is going to be a big focus for you. But the other focus, in addition to all of this like broader go-to-market, is the behavior. How can you get people to do this, or however you want them to pour it, so often? Because maybe most people will buy it after they ask an existing customer a question. I think that's how most people will buy this. Not because, yes, the ads are fun and the TikTok went viral and that'll work. But even better will be if this happens and people are like, huh, what is that? Tell me more.
Yeah.
And engineering that a little bit as a founder and trying to figure out how do you engineer that? How do you make your product encourage that could be key.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of like the Alka-Seltzer, what was it, like Snap, Fizzle, Pop, or
yeah,
like whatever.
That's fake, right? Like the whole concept doesn't need to fizzle to actually provide its benefits to you. Alka-Seltzer tablets.
I think that like sonic element is really powerful. And we have that because when you shake it, it's like it's like a maraca. So I think
what if it said no flavor on it? I'd be like, what the hell is that? Why are you putting that on there?
Describing the like muted flavor is something that is a pain. I call it flavor neutral.
But think about your early customers, by the way. This is like going to be a counterintuitive thing. And we've even have given feedback in the opposite. Make them understand it, but don't make it general. Counterintuitively, maybe this should be complicated to explain, but your early customers are going to be your biggest fans and your biggest promoters. And so if it says no flavor, and that's confusing to people, don't explain it on the packaging. Again, force it to be the conversation. When Nika asked me at dinner, wait, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why does that say no flavor on it? And I have to describe it. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. That sounds wrong as a theory of marketing,
like,
but it sounds right.
Maybe.
Yes, exactly. I think that's everything for a product like this.
Yeah, not too curious. You want them to like know what it's opaque.
It has to be memorable, right? It has to be that once I am told or I do see it, I then remember it.
Yeah.
But that initial curiosity. Any wrapping thoughts for?
I mean, it just, to me, means that actually you mentioned two potential users of your product, and I actually think they're very different. Like the mom who wants to sneak in veggies into their kid's diet, that's not going to work, right? Like the label of like, I don't know what this is, like that's not going to work. But for people like us who are super busy, I mean, like you as a banker, right? Like super busy, just like want to still order takeout, but put something healthy on top. Like that to me is probably the right entry point and your initial.
It'd be so funny if you had hot dog stand vendors go, do you want some edggies veggies before I hand you this hot dog?
I did that. I walked through the streets looking for a hot dog cart. It was harder than you'd think.
Oh yeah, there are fewer. I like a good lunch hot dog sometimes. People judge me for it. But again, like that could be an interesting channel partner for you. Is like, hey, stick this there.
But pizza
too,
I'm saving pizza for the launch. I'm saving pizza for the launch.
But all these shops could maybe love, really working with you. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So it's super natural. That was one of the inspirations for the packaging, was like, it's a mouthful to explain how to use this. And it's really intuitive if you just put some holes on top.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, on your mission, making the world healthier, good luck. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.